And to start off the discourse, yesterday or the day before, we don't know when, it was a few days ago, we were very privileged to come across a webinar of from this lady named Judy Calley, and she's a mystic and just a beautiful soul. And what she shared was how what is happening these days, that we may not even be realizing that there is so much violence in the spoken word. It's in that she calls it verbal abuse, and I don't believe she's the first one to talk about verbal abuse, but she put it so simply and so beautifully. And she started off talking about free will, how free will, determines the direction, the path of our life. And our belief system is really our perspective in life, and how we live our life is through our belief system. So if we start to believe that this world is going to pot, there's so much chaos, and we've heard some people say, let me out. They don't want to be here anymore. And be careful of your words, because let me tell you, this is a magnificent time. And by wishing not to be here anymore, you might miss out on some of the greatest opportunities to witness the humanity's ascension, not only a physical ascension, but ascension in consciousness, humanity's victory over death, over the darkness, over all of our fears. A major fear is the unknown or death. And so this is the time where we are all together in this, the whole world. And it's the first time in human history that the whole world is having this opportunity to transform together, to raise our consciousness together. There are stargates all at different major points or cross sections, or I can't even think of the word right now, but all over the world that are portals for our ascension. And right now, these stargates, or these portals to higher dimensions, are leading to, of course, wormholes and into different dimensions, but it is being supported by you, me, by all of us throughout this world, throughout the galaxy. And now, this is the first time in human history that the whole world, as well as the universe and this, the solar system and the galaxy and everyone, including the Galactic Federation, and we're all working together for not only humanity, but all living life upon this planet to ascend. And we're doing this step by step, consciously, not unconsciously. Therefore, it's so important for us to take self-responsibility. And part of this self-responsibility is watching or being the witness to what we say, what we think, what we do, what we feel. Because as we learned, it not only affects our DNA, but it touches everything, not only on this planet, but in the universe. And this is what it's meant, that even, as we wave our hand, and there is a mystical exercise or there are mystical hand movements that move the stars in the sky, that touch the stars in the sky, that can move mountains. So even the gestures that you make that are backed by emotion, that are backed by the energy of your mind, affect everything around you and within you. And as we know, everything is within us. There are many universes within us. So back to the violence, in this verbal violence. There's verbal violence in video games, all throughout the entertainment world. In comedy, in movies, in music, even in dance, there's a language. And connected with this so-called verbal violence is this very low energy that have daggers that pierce the person, people, place, thing, or whatever you touch, or whatever you're aiming your verbal violence to and toward. So all the FUs, all the SHs, all the words like lame and jerk and moron affects you, affects the person that you're aiming it to, and affects your whole environment, and it directs the way your life is going. It especially affects your power center, your will body. So, what does all of this have to do with prayer? We picked up a book. I'm sorry, here it is. By Larry Dossey, MD. Be careful what you pray for. He also wrote healing words. Be careful what you pray for. You just might get it. And he talks about prayer and curses, unintentional curses and unintentional prayer. He says, 1 in 20 Americans say they have deliberately prayed for harm for others. Most negative prayers are unintentional. They can be offered so casually, we're not even aware we're engaging in them. When people in irritation about, damn you, this is, of course, a curse. And he calls it, it's also a form of prayer because you're using the same chakras. And the more you use your emotions, put your emotions into it, and you're asking for something to happen, it's a supplication. When you say damn you, F you, you're using your voice, your creative power, and so on and so forth, your imaging power, because you can see certain things, you visualize them getting it. So this is another example of an unintentional prayer. There was an international, and these are by good people, what we consider good people. There was an international plan during the last phase of the Cold War for praying for peace in particular places. People adopted a nuclear base in, say, Britain and one, say, in Czechoslovakia. They then prayed for these bases to be dismantled and the weapons removed. This was to try to give nuclear disarmament a more concrete set of images, rather than the nebulous notion of peace. When this was going on, there was some discussion as to the way in which people should pray. Some individuals, particularly within the New Age world, thought the best way to pray was to hold the nuclear base in mind and see it bathed in an incredibly bright light, which would purify and transform it. However, since all of these bases were nuclear targets, the most obvious way in which the prayer could come true would be to have a nuclear war in which an incredibly bright light would indeed have descended on every one of these bases and purified and transformed them. It's something to think about. Their intentions were good, but they were also, without realizing, invoking a nuclear war. So once they realized what they were doing, they quickly changed their strategy. If I am driving, and he said, a woman from Chicago wrote, if I am driving and start honking my horn and thinking to myself that another driver is a jerk because he's blocking the intersection, I could, in a sense, be sending a negative prayer to that driver. I have been the driver stuck in the middle of an intersection and have felt some pretty negative stuff. I believe most of our daily thoughts may be unconscious prayer, and that all my little damn yous may get around. So by cursing, it brings more of that. And this is unconscious programming too. This comment suggests that negative prayers are woven into the fabric of everyday life. We launch them not as formal curses, but simply through the process of thinking negatively of another person. And he talks about prayer muggings and drive-by prayers as being negative prayers. And he says in the United States, mugging is the most common crime involving physical force. 1 in every 300 of us has been mugged. By this statistic, but this statistic is probably minuscule compared to those of us who have been mugged by prayer. And he gives an example of a mother praying that her child, her daughter, be elected head cheerleader. And how many of us have prayed that our child, get into an honor society or get into something or have some kind of award. And he says that this is called a mugging and drive-by prayer. If this type of prayer is answered, someone else loses. There has to be a loser if there's a winner. Someone who, for all we know, may be more deserving than oneself. And there's other types of prayers, sports and prayer. My God versus your God. I attended a large university in the Midwest that was football crazy. On the campus, there was a 4-story mosaic, clearly visible from the stadium, of Jesus with his arms raised over his head, looking just like an official signaling a touchdown. Our team rarely lost. And so I don't have to go into this, but he says almost 1/4 of the American population admits to praying for their sports team to win, and thus praying for the defeat of another team. And he mentioned even Evander Holyfield prayed to God that he beat Mike Tyson, who was a Muslim. And it goes on and on. Prayer as manipulation and control. And he talks about this mother who prayed that her son, who is a homosexual, be changed and, and realize it's wrong. And all of this. And the problem is we usually think we know what's best for others, and we waste no time telling God how to fix the person we're praying for. But anytime we're tempted to pray for the destiny of someone else, we ought to examine our own motives. If our prayers restrict the freedom and choices of others, they can be a curse, a way of manipulating others and enslaving them to our point of view. And so it's so important to take self-responsibility, even in our prayers. what are our motives for praying? Are we truly praying from the heart, from a higher vibration? And we need to trust that our prayer is already answered. So we don't need to keep saying it over and over again. So therefore, we ask all of you, including myself, to be aware of what we see, what we think, what we say, what we do, to avoid watching violence on television or listening to violence. Avoid speaking violence or using verbal abuse or bringing someone down because you feel you're in the right. Because whatever we do to others, we are doing to ourselves. And this is even in prayer. We thank you so much for joining us today. And we are asking Reverend Joseph to now lead us in deep level meditation.